football, the red zone is where a team has to make small adjustments to ensure victory. As you approach retirement, you also need to make small adjustments to ensure success. This is the Red Zone Retirement Program with registered investment advisor and enrolled agent John Mears of Mears Money Management.
Time once again for another edition of Red Zone Retirement Program, Simple Investing, Smart Future with Coach John Mears. I'm happy to be back in the saddle with you this week, John. We're going to talk about the process, your process from initial meeting to building a plan, becoming a client, walking through all those little stages. We got some things, some visuals for people to check out as well. So I'm looking forward to this chat. How are you, brother?
I'm doing good. I'm just glad to have you back. Walter was fine subbing for you as a pinch hitter.
That's right.
And that was all good. But yeah, and I'm glad you look good. That's all that matters.
There we go.
But we're glad to have you back. So,
well, yeah, it's baseball season, so it was good to have him in the bullpen warmed up and come in and pitch a few for me. But yeah, had a little bit of a little accident there, and so recovering. So I appreciate Walter filling in, and I hope you guys had a good show. And looking forward to chatting with you. I missed you and missed talking with
we all missed you too. My clients were asking about you.
So good. Well, thank you. Yeah, well, good. Mm-hmm. Well, glad to be back. And really, I don't know. I think we've touched on a few pieces of your process before, but let's dive in. Let's get going on this a little bit.
Yeah.
So walk us through the process, John, your process. We'll just kind of break it down. What makes your approach different, the things that you do?
Yeah, I believe that I'm very unique in how I do things. Now, every advisor has their own process, but I think what I like to think is everything is intentional and deliberate, what we do here, to try and get you from point A to point B to point C, and really to assist you to having a great retirement and the retirement that you've always dreamed of. There's a way to do it. I think there's a right way to do it, and I won't say a wrong way to do it, but there's a better way to do it, and I believe that that's what we have here. So.
Yeah. Well, I would say there's probably wrong ways to do it for sure. But,
yes.
But most reputable people, right, they're going to have a good, plan in place and a good system. However, again, finding that right person for you is important. So we'll walk you through some of these stages. So we'll pull up this graphic here. This is just kind of the initial thing of your kind of onboarding booklet, I suppose, right?
Yes. Yeah, so I assume that people, by the time we get to this point, we have a first conversation. We have a 15-minute phone call where we just kind of get to know if we even, talk to each other. If there's a love connection for 15 minutes. By this time, people have watched.
We'll be
this
back
podcast.
in 2 and 2, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. So people have watched the podcast. That's kind of what I tell everybody, just if they want to get to know me or anything like that. This podcast is actually ideal. They can go back and find topics that they like. So by that time, if they have watched or listened to the podcast enough, we've done an initial phone call. From there, then I kind of start coaching them through, well, now how do you find an advisor? And one of the things I send out to people is this 16-page booklet on how to find a financial advisor. So I titled it Planning Your Financial Future, and kind of goes through what you look for in an advisor, what kind of experience, what kind of communication, how do they plan, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So whether you use me or any other advisor, I think it's a very, very helpful booklet. I also send out to people a copy of the first year checklist. And this checklist,
we got that for you to check out. There we go.
Yes, all is how we start out at the beginning, how we do it in months 1 and 2, months 3 and 4, and how we go through the entire year. And so we try and cover everything. Now, not everybody needs everything, but we want to make sure no stone goes unturned. So I will probably bring this up to every single person, even if it's a skip over this kind of thing. So
this is great though, right? You got that beginning process. You've got the little different pieces for people to see, months 1 and 2, 3 and 4, to your point. I can move it over here. We got 5, 6, 7, 8. So you kind of really give a good breakdown of the different pieces.
Go through it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so one other thing that I also bring up is I also have, I send out a physically, I prefer to do this physically. I send out the planning guide. So it's a little booklet for you to fill out some information. It's not just how much you have in your bank account. There's also some questions about some emotional questions, and also some questions about, have you done this? Have you done that? Some yes and no questions. And also, are there any conflicts maybe in your marriage between you and your spouse, on some topics, what do you think is important? What does your spouse think is important? So we kind of go through everything. This is kind of a dig deep kind of thing. And I ask people, take it seriously, fill it out the best you can. I don't ask that you do your own financial plan, but the more information we have in this booklet that you fill out, the better off we are. One other thing we do is we also have you send in a copy of your most recent tax return. So at this point, after you're preparing for all this, then we have our first meeting where we're actually going to talk. So after our initial conversation, I send all this stuff out to you. Then we're going to have our first meeting after we've filled out that information. And one thing I like to do is give out a tax report based on your tax return. And it's a quick win. It's an easy win. I say it's free because you can take this tax report and decide not to work with me in the future. And you have some very, very useful information. This tax report goes over a lot of different things in your tax return, including how you're being taxed, what areas are of concern on your tax return, capital gains. There's several pages of this tax report.
And I like this little pie chart here to kick things off, right? So you kind of get this overview, and then of course, you could dive further in. I'll show some of the things here, but we won't bother you with that on YouTube right this now. But just gives you an idea, right? So you can definitely, and that's cool that you send that out complimentary as well.
Yeah, it's just something we go over, and we'll go over it in our first meeting. And then what I also like to do is go through that booklet, the client booklet where you fill out everything. And I like to kind of go section by section. I like to get granular with that and dig into it and kind of go, okay, explain this further, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, or what is it that you want? What does this mean? Or hey, that number's different, or I need a better number here in order to help you. So it's just a lot of information here that we can go through. And so that kind of takes up our entire hour that we're meeting. And after we go through this, as we're going through it, I offer some advice and I offer some suggestions. So it's not being a total prescription, but it's some ideas here. And I tell people, you can take all this information. I think there's a lot of information I can give you, and never work with me. And I hope I provided value just at that level to begin with. Yeah. So that's that first meeting. And then after that first meeting, I tell people, if you want to work together, let me know. And then we'll start the onboarding process with a second meeting where we'll do some planning. At that second meeting, and there may be some back and forth in this too, by the way, but as you can see here, I give a 1-page financial plan. It's a synopsis of everything. And I really like this 1-page plan because it kind of goes through your goals. It kind of states, okay, this is what you told me when we met last time, what your goals were.
Right.
Yeah, and so,
which is why, Coach, you got to be honest when you're sitting down with advisors, right? This is the time not to I withheld some information. You be forthright so that you get the plan you're after.
Exactly. If you're not being honest with me, I'm not able to help you as much, and I'm here to help. So it's pretty. So in this 1-page plan, it's a synopsis. Now, on the back end, I prepare reams of paper for my plan, but I try and consolidate it all and get it all concise because people don't want a 150-page booklet on their financial plan.
Nobody wants to read War and Peace, for their financial plan. Yeah.
So this shows their net worth. It kind of shows where their assets are, kind of shows our asset allocation that we suggest. And then what is most important is we provide the action items now and then action items in the future. And what we do with this 1-page plan, we go over it literally every single year when we meet for tax season. We kind of go through this and update it, and we have new action plans, again, for now and in the future, and continue to update this continuously all the time. So this is what we're getting initially is this 1-page plan. And then, again, we're onboarding here. So these action plans, we're going to start working on these. One thing then that we do is we provide what I call a client engagement standards. So we kind of know, by the way, we have a plan here. How are we going to communicate? What kind of response times are we expecting here? How are we going to communicate? What is the planning process like? So I kind of go through all this, and we actually sign it. We actually initial and sign this thing, so we kind of know, okay, by the way, you understand how we're going to work together in the future. And I think this is very helpful so that people kind of know, what's it like to work with a planner. Yeah. And then the last thing I give at this second meeting is what I would call the annual service calendar. And it just kind of shows that as much as we've covered here, as much as we may be working on in the first year, there is a cadence that we will always be working on. We will continuously be working on things during different times of the year, whether it's winter, spring, summer, or fall. You can say your James Taylor part here. All you got to do is call. But yeah, we have a cadence here. We kind of go through this, and there's a way that we do it. And I explain that in the service calendar here. There are several pages through this kind of explaining, the front page shows basically what's going on, and then there's explanations after that. So
gotcha.
I would venture to say that no client leaves after this second meeting, and as we continue doing our onboarding, that doesn't know what's going on. So there's and what you find out through all this is that everything kind of interacts together. So one of the themes I like to point out here is that it's not just investments. That's something that gets people maybe to pick up the phone sometimes. But as you can see here, planning is all encompassing here. So if somebody just calls up and they're hyperventilating and they're out of breath, how much can you make me? How much can you make me? My brother doubled his money with Palantir last year.
Right.
That's not a planning process. No, it's not that the investments don't matter. They certainly do. They matter.
Yeah.
But we get to the investments kind of after we've gone through everything else. So we kind of dig through everything. We kind of work backwards. And then we find out, oh, by the way, with all that you told me, with all the conflicts and agreements you have in your marriage, with where you're at and where you're trying to get to, this is the investment that's appropriate for you, rather than starting with the investment and going, let's hope this works. Ride through it.
And that makes a ton of sense, John, because things are going to change too, right? So if you walk into it, from an investment standpoint first, instead of a planning standpoint first, as life changes, you're going to be, you're going to do that every time. You're kind of, I guess you're putting the cart before the horse, really.
Correct.
Right? So you might as well go from a planning standpoint, because as your life changes, and we all know things are going to happen, right? I just recently had a wild, crazy accident that the odds were just ridiculous that something like that would happen, but they did. So life is going to life, right? So you've got to be willing to adapt, and your plan should too.
Yeah, and that's why we have that cadence, and that's why we go out continuously. So that's why the first year we try and dig into everything, just make sure nothing's missed. But then we still continue to follow up on that every quarter as we go on and throughout the future and throughout our entire relationship.
Yeah, because
investments may matter, may change as we go along.
Yeah, because John, I'm 55 today, so what we're doing right now might work for the next couple of years, but then I get to 62 or 65. Well, now we're maybe changing some things up, right? Yep. Everybody's going to be that way, right? So how you feel about X, Y, or Z is certainly going to change, through the years. So again, pretty common sense, but it's surprising sometimes how people don't think that. They like, oh, I got a plan 5 years ago. I'm good. I set it. I put it in place. I don't have, or I put my 401k, selections in place, 9-10 years ago. I'm good. And it's like, well, no, you're growing, but you got a lot more to do.
Constant monitoring is what we like to do. That doesn't mean we rehash the entire plan every time we meet. Is oftentimes, hopefully, we did our job correctly at the beginning. There are tweaks and there are movements, and something like you said, a life event may happen with a marriage or a divorce or a death in the family. Things happen, a birth. All sorts of things happen. Yeah. And so we just kind of work through all that. But my process, again, I believe is unique from other advisors, because I just had a client recently call, and it was a former tax client that I had way, way back in the day. And he calls up and just says, hey, I want to go with my mom's advisor. This is before he had called me. He said, I'm going with my mom's advisor, but I've thought about you. And I just kind of asked him, well, what is this advisor suggesting that you do? And maybe you should stick with him. So if he's fine, I'm going to tell you to stay with him. But all the guy led with was, here's what your investments should be. And I told him, I don't give a rat's, about what the investments are. Right. How are you going to make this last? What other things are we going to do as far as Roth? What are we doing here? Yeah. The investments are important, that they come kind of last after we've done everything else. And that way you can feel comfortable that the investment choices you have are aligned with what your goals are, rather than going, because he was really worried, are these the right investments for me? Right. You should never have to ask that question.
Yeah, to me, that's almost like, working with your builder, and he's like, let's talk about the roof. And you're like, well, shouldn't we talk about the foundation first? Because it's not even poured yet. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. And I get it. I mean, investments are the sexy big ticket item that, it's the engine in the car, whatever you want to use. But there's a lot of pieces, John, to that, to the whole retirement process. And I think that's where communication, so because you talked about, it's not a wholesale change every time you get together. What is the communication like, right? Is it heavier in the front end and then kind of maintenance through the years, or how does that work?
So, yeah. And so that's why I have that client communications standards here, because we do let people know how often we communicate. And the way we do things here up front, there will be more communication, and there's nothing set in stone, but generally we have the 2 meetings, maybe a third meeting, and then we kind of work them into that quarterly cadence after that. Okay. But sometimes people have a question that first year. And so I always let people know, you're never bothering us. Let us know. But usually after the first year, we meet twice a year formally. That's in March and in October. We have a spring meeting and a fall meeting.
Okay.
And then we have these planning topics that we go over, and that's usually done by either video mail, or we're going to have short meetings for that here and there. A lot of it's just paperwork. Hey, can you look this over, make sure this is correct? And we'll do a little webinar here and there, that sort of thing. But we meet formally, and then we're in contact the rest of the year here and there as needed for the clients. And that just goes on forever.
I think, John, we've talked many times about how advisors get paid in different setups for different companies. For a lot of, advisors that focus on the planning process like yourself, for lack of a better term, it's kind of like being on retainer, right? So it's like sometimes people think, oh, I got to call my financial guy, but he's going to charge me. And it's like most of the ones that I know, especially from a retirement planning standpoint, they don't do that, right? It's like, you got a question, something's happened, the market's been crazy, whatever, right? We can talk through that stuff. So is that fairly accurate?
Yeah. So I do have people ask that every now and then. Can we just help with this part of planning and that part of planning? And what they aren't realizing is, like, if someone wants to know, hey, I need some advice with, say, Medicare planning or a Roth conversion, but I really don't need you all the time. I'm like, well, we forget that this is linked to that, and that is also linked to this other thing, which also comes right back to this eventually. And they're all intertwined. And so this is why I tell people that's not really what I believe in. I don't agree with that. And I've also seen people say, well, I'm going to hire a fee-only financial planner that's going to set my investment portfolio. I got news for you. If you just need an investment portfolio, just go on ChatGPT. You don't need an advisor for that. You need an advisor for a full holistic plan. That's what you need an advisor for. Now, you may not believe you need an advisor for all that, and that's fine. I tend to have people that come into my practice. There are people that are, for lack of a better term, they're worried. I don't want to say they're desperate, but they're worried. They're concerned.
Well, there's so many moving parts, John. We talk about that all the time. The accumulation phase, the tools out there now for DIYing the growth money, the growth phase is a heck of a lot easier than it was, right? Yeah. But it's the preservation phase, to your point a second ago, when you pull lever 1 and it does something to option 6 that you didn't even see coming, right? Until 2 years from now or whatever, like Irma or whatever the case is, then you just don't know what you don't know. So.
Yeah, again, everything is so intertwined, and I always tell people, the more I know in this industry, the more I realize how much I don't know, because there's just so much in there. Every door I open up, there's 18 more doors to go through, and the rules change. And the rules are changing.
The tax codes change, and the blah, blah, blah changes. And so you got to stay abreast of that stuff. And
taxes are always changing.
And we talk about it all the time. Do you really want to do this in retirement yourself? Probably not. You want to hang with your grandkids. You want to golf. You want to go do stuff, whatever, so that's why you hire somebody to do the heavy lifting. It's still a collaborative effort, though, John, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. So I always tell people, I'm not going to be the yes man or the no man here. I'm going to be the presentation man. We're going to talk about what your options are. As Thomas Sowell, the famous economist, says, there are no solutions. There is only trade-offs. So that's one thing we're going to do. We're going to say, okay, this is what you should be doing. Well, what is the trade-off to that? I want my money to last forever. You're saying, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Well, in that case, this is the type of investment you may have. It won't be sexy. You're not going to double your money with Palantir in 1 year, because you don't know what's going to happen at some point if you want to make sure that your money lasts forever. Those are two completely, different things here. And so, we're going to collaborate. If you say, hey, I still want to invest in Palantir, then we're okay, well, your money might not last. And so we're going to have to explain, figure out a different way to do things. But
that's great.
Everything is related to each other. And I have to ask people, and this is why the communication is important. So I'm not shocked when you tell me, hey, by the way, my kids or grandkids are doing this sort of thing, or we're planning on moving to New Mexico or whatever it may be. If we're communicating, I can plan and help you, make decisions, informed decisions, so that you'll have a great retirement.
All right, Coach. Well, if people want to get started, and they saw some of these things we flashed up here, they'd like to get some of this stuff for themselves, right? So they can look at it a little further. What's the best way to go about that?
The best way is, we have always these links to my free books. You can always check that out. But really, if you just want to have a quick conversation, go to bookachatwithjohn.net. You can just kind of say, hey, John, I heard you on your podcast. Just want to do a quick 15-minute intro meeting. Okay. And we'll just talk. We'll just chat. I'm not out there selling anything. I'm just, we may talk about Angels baseball for all we talk, but we're just kind of find out if we're on the same wavelength, if we're on, in the same, world here.
Yeah.
If there's a love connection, because I only want to work, and you also only want to work with somebody you like, really, at the end of the day. So
okay, well, there you go. So we'll have links for everything in the show notes as always. Go to bookachatwithjohn.net. Of course, we're going to have a little thing pop up here about his books in just a second. But if you'd like to get started with this big old booklet, like John talked about as well, so we'll throw that back up on the screen. Again, just reach out to him, right? Get started, take a little action for yourself today, and go to bookachatwithjohn.net, or just click on some of the links we have in the show descriptions down below. Coach, that's going to do it this week. So thanks for hanging out, breaking it down. Good to be back with you. Looking forward to doing some more shows here in the upcoming weeks ahead. So don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify, audio form, of course, right here on YouTube and video as well. Thumbs up, notification, all that good stuff so you catch new episodes. And drop a comment down below as well if you've got some questions or you just want to comment about Angels baseball. Maybe not. All right, we'll see you next time, Coach. Thanks for hanging out, buddy.
Thanks, Marc.
We'll catch you next time here on Red Zone Retirement Program, Simple Investing, Smart Future with Coach John Mears. John has a couple of free books, Diffuse and Tax-Free Retirement in California, that reveal exactly how you can experience zero taxes in retirement and overcome the IRS lien on your 401k, IRA, and 403b, which could threaten your future lifestyle. These are complimentary, so all you have to do to pick these up 100% free is just stop by rescuemyretirement.net. That's rescuemyretirement.net. Fill in the basic info and he'll ship those out to you immediately. That's rescuemyretirement.net for a copy of Diffuse and Tax-Free Retirement in California.
Advisory services offered through Mears Money Management, Inc., an RIA registered in the states of California and Texas. California Department of Insurance License number 0685203.